Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming today, which is, in the middle of the first working week of the year. It is wonderful to see all of you here today, and I thank you for your interest and making the time. I'd like to also thank the Bangalore International Center and the team here, especially Vikram Bhatt, Sandhya and Sunena for their support, and also Suresh at the tech team. It is my privilege to showcase my ongoing work here at the BIC, which is the first time I'm doing so in India, in my home city of Bangalore. This talk, which is titled Looking for Bombay, Mumbai, Bombay, Fine Art Photography and the Working Classes, takes from my larger PhD dissertation title, which is, as we can see, Looking for Bombay, Mumbai, Bombay, Photography, Identity and the Working Classes between the 70s and the 90s. This particular talk draws from one of my chapters where I look at how fine art photographers, a few of them who were from Bombay, captured the working classes and the laboring poor. One of the questions I try to understand is the gaze of the pictorialist or fine art photographers photographing a city which was undergoing massive urban transformation from the wane of the Communist Party that was active in trade unions in the city's mill district until the 1960s, the rise of a regionalist, fundamentalist, anti-minority organization, later political party, the Shiv Sena, from the 70s onward, the emergency of 75 to 77, the coming of economic liberalization in 91, to the Bombay riots of 1992-93. In the interim, the great textile mill strike of 82 saw the gradual shutting down of mills, leaving over a lack of mill workers unemployed, thus giving rise to deindustrialization, job insecurity, and precarious contractual employment, a phenomenon that we see in India today as well. Now, the images that you see in the slide today give a glimpse into some of the other areas of photography of the working classes that I look at in my dissertation, which I do not go into in today's talk. So this is to give you some sense of the extent of my work. On the left is an image of advertising photography. The right is an image of photojournalism. And in the center is an image of a censored publication. So as I look for the many layers of the city and the many different ways of capturing the working classes through these different mediums of fine art photography, advertising photography, photojournalism, and bureaucratic photography between Bombay, Mumbai, and Bombay, I'm also speculating on the photographer's gaze, and there's just not one kind of gaze, the subject gaze and my gaze. And I also invite you to ponder with me. It is an intersection of gazes, of looking at the working classes and their everyday lives. So I hope that gives you the larger sense of my work, and now I'll go into what I'm trying to do in this talk. What do I mean by fine art photographers? And some of you will be familiar with this term. These are photographers who bring in an element of aesthetics and composition in their work. They are not necessarily employed by a newspaper or magazine, but fall within a larger gambit of freelance photography. They work on a commission basis, say for a photo news agency such as Magnum or the National Geographic magazine, and exhibit their works in galleries and museums. So we have Looking for Bombay, Mumbai, Bombay, which is the larger, the working title of my dissertation. And I'm going to introduce another more specific framework, which will dive into what I'm trying to do in this chapter or talk, in how we look at the working classes and urban poor. The framework borrows its title from the Marathi poet Namdev Dhasal's poem Speculations on a Shirt, translated from the Marathi. And I find the last three lines, which are highlighted in bold, pertinent. And I invite you to read and reflect on those lines with me. Dhasal was known for his vitriol and was also a complex figure. He was accused of domestic violence by his wife, Malika Amar Sheikh, who was the daughter of the communist leader Amar Sheikh. And these lines, a human being shouldn't become so spotless. One should leave a few stains on one's shirt. One should carry on oneself a little bit of sin. And in this talk and presentation, I speculate on the photographer's speculations of framing of the working classes through the trope of the shirt, the worker's shirt. And some of the questions I ask and invite you to think with me: is there a reappropriation of working class bodies undergoing disenfranchisement and instability in these photographs? Are there not just a few stains on not just the working classes, but also on the camera's gaze? How are we really looking and speculating on the shirt? The Dalit poet Namdev Dhasal, who was a founding member of the Dalit Panthers movement in 1972, also hailed from the working class neighborhood of Kamathipura, which is also the site of one of the photographs we will look at today. Dhasal began his working life as a taxi driver, and here I include a photograph of a taxi driver in a Kali Pili, or the quintessential black and yellow Fiat Padmini taxi that one saw on the roads in Bombay. But I want to draw your attention to the look of vacancy and despair that the driver wears on his face, as he seems trapped in his existence as the photographer has tightly framed the composition. While the driver's window is rolled down, that of his passengers in the rear seat is rolled up on a rainy day in the city. They are protected and shielded from the rain and the city's vagaries, but the taxi driver is not. And this is the alienation which is highlighted in the next slide that I will show you. I'm going to do a bit of a digression here as a way to enter this presentation, which is to talk about how filmmakers were also using photography for their work in thinking about how to present the city. All manner of people from the media industries were photographing Bombay for different reasons in the same time period of my study. For instance, the filmmaker Muzaffar Ali writes in his autobiography that he photographed the city extensively for the visual storyboard of his 1978 film Gaman, or Departure. The filmmaker articulates that it was through the process of photography that the urban canvas of the film became clear in his mind. And as he was undergoing this process, he writes, and I quote, "Bombay for the first time was emerging as a larger-than-life entity. It was a character both ugly and beautiful. It had to be felt by the protagonist to become real. There was the transient way from which he'd left behind in the village, like thousands of people in that predicament. There was also the aspect of the local people of Maharashtra facing unemployment, as they were not flexible enough to change as per the need of the hour. Gaman was all about displacement and continues to be about displacement," unquote. Muzaffar Ali calls this transformation in the landscape a tragedy, which in turn made its people faceless. So I'm going to play a song from Ali's film Gaman, but unfortunately it's not your typical Bollywood item number, but it is melodramatic and poignant enough. Subtitles in English come on a few seconds later in the song.
सीने में जलन, आंखों में तूफान सा क्यों है? सीने में जलन, आंखों में तूफान सा क्यों है? इस शहर में हर शख्स परेशान सा क्यों है? इस शहर में हर शख्स परेशान सा क्यों है? सीने में जलन। धड़कने का बहाना कोई ढूंढे, दिल है तो धड़कने का बहाना कोई ढूंढे, पत्थर की तरह बेहिसो बेजान सा क्यों है, पत्थर की तरह बेहिसो बेजान सा क्यों है, सीने में जलन। तन्हाई की ये कौन सी मंजिल है रफीको, तन्हाई की ये कौन सी मंजिल है रफीको, ताहत दे नजर एक बयाबान सा क्यों है, ताहत दे नजर एक बयाबान सा क्यों है, सीने में जलन। क्या कोई नई बात नजर आती है हमें, क्या कोई नई बात नजर आती है हमें, आईना हमें देख के हैरान सा क्यों है, आईना हमें देख के हैरान सा क्यों है, सीने में जलन आंखों में तूफान सा क्यों है, इस शहर में हर शख्स परेशान सा क्यों है, सीने में जलन।
In the end, we see the late actor Farooq Sheikh, who plays the protagonist Ghulam Hassan, wearing a similar look of vacancy as we saw in the photograph of the taxi driver as he waits for passengers streaming out of offices. I look at the work of 5 photographers mainly, 3 men and 2 women, Raghubi Singh, Pablo Bartholomew, Foy Nissen, Sunitara Porwala, and Ketaki Shape. And these are some of the covers of their photo books. I look at how fine art photographers glimpsed at this vast network of the laboring population in late 20th century Bombay and may have given their subjects some semblance of humanity and individuality. So what I will do here is look at how these photographs taken by these pictorialist photographers, while being invasive and voyeuristic to an extent, use it to accord, according to the philosopher Hannah Arendt, not just a space of appearance and visibility, but also give the subject a space to negotiate, confront, challenge, express, contemplate, repose, and dream. Artists in post-independence India broke away from Euro-American conventions of art such as classical painting and critiqued the post-colonial condition in their work. They found a visual grammar immersed in the everyday, on the streets, in found objects, and through lifting and loafing. Art historian Sonal Khullar elaborates on their departure from traditional art schooling in establishments such as the JJ School of Art in Bombay and the Progressive Artists Group. And she writes, Bombay painters and poets came to lifting, documenting and defamiliarizing their environment by citing and subverting street signs, advertisements, state propaganda, calendar art, film posters, and newspaper photographs, and took to loafing, a mode of critical observation and analysis, and the pursuit of committed deprofessionalization and translation across spaces by mobilizing the ordinary yet extraordinary spaces of the pawn shop and the Irani restaurant in order to reinvent artistic sociability and subjectivity. One of the central premises of this talk or chapter is how class and the gaze play into the composition of photographs studied. I find art historian Caroline Jones' assessment of post-war American artists and the fashioning of the individual modern male artist important in this context. Jones observed that these artists, American artists, place great emphasis on independent creativity and authorship, which is in line with the rise of humanism and enlightenment in tandem with the coming of nations and industries. She also notes that these artists were the beneficiaries of state policies and land grants. So too were some of these Indian photographers whose work is examined in this study. I interrogate how their class position intersects with the composition and gaze of the photograph and what kind of audience may have been fostered. The photographers of the everyday in Bombay were invested in the creative idiom of, and I quote, the tensions between the art of picturing and the material facts of the art object itself, unquote, and over here, the working class subjects, unquote. Similar to how art house cinema in India was understood as forging a viewership or audience that is responsible, enlightened, and committed to forming informed and refined political views, photography was also attempting to cultivate understandings of the city through the medium. Bengali language filmmakers in India such as Ritvik Ghatak, Mrinal Sen, and Satyajit Ray, and I would add Malayalam filmmakers as well, were no longer committed to making films that conveyed the developmentalist narrative of the nation state. This was because something changed by the 1960s as post-colonial economic goals were not met, which thus paved the way, and I quote, for deep-seated civil unrest, disruptive rage, and political violence, unquote. Historian Rachana Majumdar notes that the figure of the angry young man should not just be relegated to the actor Amitabh Bachchan, who played the vigilante hero in Hindi films scripted by Salim Khan and Javed Akhtar, popularly known as the Salim-Javed duo of the 1970s and 80s, but also other young men, particularly those from filmmaker Mrinal Sen's Calcutta film trilogy, and others such as Syed Akhtar Mirza, Jabbar Patel, and N. Chandra. Majumdar writes, and I quote, youth, rather than representing a stage of growth in the life of an individual, figures in Sen's trilogy as a permanent condition for the possibility of political anger, unquote. Bombay, to an extent like Calcutta, bore the imprint of the international burden of the Indian left with the presence of communist and socialist trade unions in the city's textile mills, which had begun to wane by this time of my study. Majumdar writes that anger as a subject is implicit in Sen's trilogy. She continues that it marked a time of empathetic identification with groups that the Indian left often marked out as class enemies and anarchists. In this image, the late photographer Raghubeer Singh photographed 3 male holy revelers in the year 1990 in the working class neighborhood of Kamathipura. Here he is face to face with 3 men who are in the midst of a clearly emotional and distressed moment during Holi and captures it. They stand flanked by a board on the wall which has text embossed on top in Marathi on the right. And it says Jai Bhim or Hail Bhim after Bhimrao Ambedkar, Bharatiya Republican Party or the Republican Party of India. This embossed text goes on to say the Ambedkarite slogan, Shikha Sangatit Vya Sangharsh Kara, or educate, organize, agitate in the center. And finally, in the bottom right corner in brackets is Dr. Baba Saheb. This is a scene beyond the frame which has agitated these men. But Raghuveer Singh, the photographer, has entered the frame, captured their reaction and confrontation. The man on the left, whose face is stained in black, seemed to lend a shoulder of solidarity to the other two who are caught in the throes of the moment. Singh chronicles what happened at the scene, and I quote, "In Mumbai, a man is angered when holy festival color enters his eyes," unquote. We do not know what has happened, but Holi would have occasioned long-standing grievances and anger to do with caste and labor in this working-class neighborhood. The three young men in front, in turn, articulate their solidarity through physical support. And the Ambedkarite slogan on the board has a larger significance and meaning here, for it extends from the board to being actively carried out in the public space, conveying to us that Ambedkar's presence and teaching is entrenched in the fabric of Kamathipura and beyond, with the work done by various anti-caste movements and parties such as the Satya Shodhak Samaj or the Truth Seekers Society, and also, as I mentioned earlier, the Dalit Panthers Party, of which the poet Dasal was a founder. But this image also elucidates the caste tensions beyond. And within the Shiv Sena, who drew in large numbers of Shudras or OBCs, and also the poet Dasal himself. This photograph or moment was taken much after the Angry Young Man cinema moment, but the indignation and frustration is still palpable in 1990, the year in which it was taken. But by this time, many changes have taken place. More secure working class jobs, such as working in textile mills, have given way to more insecure forms of labor, and many of these workers are now women who work in cramped conditions. The anger now is emasculated. In an interview with the author V.S. Naipaul of India, A Million Mutinies Now, about his Bombay photographs, Raghuveer Singh highlights a number of things when asked about his relationship to the city, bringing in the word pitilessness, which later in the interview he clarifies that it means the frank eye in his photography. And I quote, and that's what he said, he calls it the modern industrial city with all its crowds and stresses, unquote. Singh's picture of the Kamathipura holy revelers is linked together with those of these images, also by him. On the left, we see laborers pushing heavy loads through a busy road, a common sight that was also noticed in the song that we saw as Ghulam drove around the city. And on the right, in a group celebrating Ambedkar's birthday. In Ambedkar's birth anniversary celebration, men, women, and children surround a food cart used by vendors featuring a garlanded brass sculpture bust of Bhim Rao that is fortified. They would have been part of a larger procession. As at the rear, we also see a garlanded and framed portrait of Ambedkar, which is propped up higher. Art historian Gary Tarkatov writes, and I quote, "For Buddhists and other people living in Maharashtra, the image of a framed picture of Ambedkar is a simple but clear expression of the Mahar, own modest yet cosmic desires and potentiality." Here, those who had been forbidden of public presence announced both their presence and their newly claimed right to a city by displaying an image of their savior who pleaded their cause before the world and taught them that they were more than just children of God or Harijans, as Gandhi had called them. They are the followers of Baba Sahib Ambedkar. The garland around the bust, the neck of Ambedkar's bust, is not part of its structure, but something added by respectful followers. Like the image's fresh coat of paint, the garland indicates the community's active presence, unquote. In this image on the right, the way the man places his hands on Ambedkar's shoulders, the way the child, there's a community of men, women, and children who congregate at this commemorative destination as they push the cart through the streets of Bombay. It is a different journey here. All the men, women, and children circling Ambedkar draw strength and pride from his public symbolic presence. But there is something else going on in this image of the laborers on the left. If we look at the man in the blue shirt on the extreme left, he is looking into the camera, and so are the two laborers on the extreme right who are pushing another cart. Singh has stepped into Bhendi Bazaar, a busy market neighborhood in South Mumbai, in the middle of the road and taken this photograph. And while he does so, he is on one level interjecting into the frame with his presence, which he makes known. But in doing so, he invites the subject of his gaze to not just acknowledge his intervening presence, which could be interruptive, but in the process captures their agony and exhaustion. He allows them to register their frustration with his presence and the relentless burden of their work. Singh, unlike most other photographers of his time in India, had access to Kodachrome, the 35mm film, because of his association with the National Geographic magazine. The film was not available in India at the time because of state control on imported goods. His photos wear an intensive colorized look, and the subjects are rendered more starkly and undeniably more voyeuristically, for their skin tone, the sweat and grease are exacerbated, especially with his use of flash in darker settings, such as the one on the bottom left. In this set of photographs, we see more of his direct confrontation, but of singular male working class subjects with Singh in different settings. On the left, of a small-scale dabbawala or tiffin carrier, for which the city is known. On the bottom left, a scene in the slum Dharavi, where Singh has managed to catch the stare of a man resting, and of course the bottom of a woman in a sari, and of another in Nagpada on the right, of a horse cart driver who lives right above the horse shed. Both these photographs capture cramped quarters, but they again invite the subject to look back at the camera than become a part of the anonymous crowd in other images. The photograph of the dabbawala on the top left, who stands in front of a water tanker, ubiquitous with the city because of its water shortages and battles over the resource, and a fire engine, is like many other photographs captured by Singh. It embodies the aggression and anger of the city. This anger, Rachna Majumdar encapsulates, and I quote, as the affective structure of the everyday, unquote. Raghubeer Singh, in its conversation with Naipaul, shares his views of Bombay. There are several forces working in Bombay. These have come through in one's pictures. It is a go-ahead city. There is tremendous movement and energy. People come to it from all parts of India to make a living and a future. So there is optimism. At the same time, seeing the people in Dharavi, the famous great slum of Bombay and other desperate places, seeing the people on the pavement, one feels and questions. How much can the city provide? How can it cope? What will happen to these people? Will many of them be pushed out? You can't ignore these aspects of Bombay, the Mayanagri, or city of wealth, and I will add city of illusion, of course, where real estate can be almost as pricey as in Paris or New York. Anthropologist Arjun Appadurai notes that homes for the poor are spaces where sleep can be forged and where the act of sleeping is also a time of forging well-being. While none of these photographs showcase eviction or threat as, to actual shelter such as slums, we must keep in mind that even though what Appadurai says about sleeping in public as being full of respite, it is not that the homeless can sleep without threat to their being through robbery and other forms of physical violence and indignity. He writes that sleeping bodies are so ubiquitous within the urban landscape that people walk over them at any point. The photographs in this chapter of people sleeping, mostly men, and largely taken by the photographer Bartholomew, are of people sleeping on beaches, pavements, and in desolate areas, and taken from a distance, unlike those by Singh, which are taken very close to their subject, as we saw earlier. In these photographs, Bartholomew captures two men sleeping in different parts of Chowpatty, and who they both wear their footwear as they sleep in public because they have no place to store it. In the image on the right, it is probably early morning, and there is a lone fishing boat at the shore, which you can see, and it has probably come back from its early morning catch. In the distance is a row of buildings in a miasma of haze. The line of buildings, representative of expensive prime real estate, is inaccessible. The three registers of geography in this image, the beach, the sea, and the island jutting out, are separated from each other, each to its own. One is of a body on of a laboring man sleeping, the other of a boat, and the third of distant buildings. Just as the subject in this pair of images secures sleep and space, the photographer too ascribes that visual element of honoring space. The men here are not sleeping in cramped quarters, nor are they huddled in uncomfortable footpaths, but at the same time do we understand this capaciousness to be an abandonment to space and the elements by the city. They are not harassed at this time. They have probably figured out a time where the police do not patrol the beach for public sleepers. It is well known that sleeping in public is not taken kindly to by authorities, but it is a common sight. But the photographer frames his photographs in such a way that we do not see them as castaways in the city to be stepped over, but give them their space to rest and to be. In Two Drunks Asleep, the image on the right, Bartholomew frames a kind of desperation and decrepit living. Two men who sleep on a pavement, one in a state of stupor and the other in deep sleep, are framed against a boundary wall that is falling apart. The wall keeps these two men out from accessing shelter inside, obviously, and has cast them out on the street. And in the other, on the left, the photograph of a more crowded footpath, homeless ragpicker children sleep huddled together in their burlap sacks for protection and warmth. One child who is awake stands and looks at the photographer and hesitatingly smiles at him. Here we move to two similar images taken in quick succession by Singh, again of workers eating lunch at a cart beneath a flyover. The food cart, which sells pav bhaji, a local popular snack that we're familiar with, is parked in central Mumbai and Worli. In this site, we feel an almost overbearing claustrophobic weight of the flyover above. The year in which this photograph was taken is 1990. Liberalization is underway. Development has taken over. The mills have been shuttered and gradually morphing into malls and corporate hubs. Flyovers have been constructed, obstructing more traditional modes of access for transport and the working class who maneuver them. Beyond, we see a couple of cars parked, a common site where such areas are designated as semi-permanent parking lots. Bombay historian Prashant Kidambi writes that the growth of the informal economy of India with the onset of economic liberalization meant that core industries in many cities were run to the ground, and in the case of Bombay, it was primarily the textile industry. This caused, and I quote, the retrenchment of millions of workers, laborers who are casually employed, low-paid, who toil in small-scale manufacturing enterprises and seasonal industries that lie outside the purview of any protective labor legislation, unquote. So how do we see the fact that these food vendors or street businesses are outside the purview of any protective labor legislation? In both of these photographs, the vendor has his hand on the pillar, if you can see, that supports the cart. We also see the vendor and two of his customers who sport wrist watches in a city ruthlessly governed by time. But the vendor moving the cart is also an indication of how the police and the municipal authorities attack street businesses, and so did the Shiv Sena, not particularly local Marathi food businesses, thereby setting in place, and I quote, an unfailing routine for Shiv Sena rallies ever since, unquote. The presence of the food vendor, who has one hand to navigate the cart, tells us about how food services were rendered to the working classes, and also about how law enforcement agents exerted their authority over public space and turned the street into a site of struggle between the police and those sections of the poor who depended on casual occupations for their livelihood. Licenses were granted by the government of Bombay to hawkers to park in designated areas. For instance, hawkers could not assemble near a municipal market. Anthropologist Jonathan Anjaria tells us that until 1998, the hawkers would show old pattis to hostile municipal workers and the police as proof of their rightful claim to particular spots on the side of the road, preventing some of the worst extortion demands, unquote. You also have photographs taken by Ketaki Sheth in the bylanes of Bachubai Ki Wadi, which move away from earlier depictions of masculinity. Here you have on the left objects such as a cart, ladder, bucket, and other pieces of furniture, a woman or a man whose head is covered and sits under the ladder, and two dogs peer out from the raised platform, one visibly suspicious as if seeming to ask who the intruder is. The photographer has taken photographs of Pinky's family, her neighbors, and a wedding scene in the neighborhood, chronicling the more personal stories of working class lives with a greater presence of women. These images of women, as I understand them, move away from the more popular voyeuristic portrayals of working women in the city, that is, of the sex workers of Kamathipura. One senses a range of expressions during a wedding scene, contemplation within the community, and on the right, Pinky and her friends or family, Saira and Rani, are physically close to each other, but keep their distance from the photographer, while they display bonds of affection. And you also have scenes of women asserting themselves in everyday life and politics, and the work that they endure as they fill up water. In conclusion, I argue that through the photographs assembled in this chapter, the material conditions of the workers both at work or at their place of home between the 70s and 90s, marching towards capitalism in Bombay, was witnessing the rampant material death of its workers. The shifting and insecure nature of casual labor and instability in the capitalist economy meant that many workers were becoming aggressive towards outsiders. A study of photography uncovers how this marginalization reflects the gradual breaking down of workers' resistance and the coming of communalism. And here you have two poignant images, one taken by the late Foy Nissen and the other by Sunita Raporwala, of two street-side palmists, one who is away and the other busy at work speaking to a worker, possibly about his horoscope. One thing has to be said about footpaths in South Bombay and zoning laws, in that they are broader and that, there was space accorded to conduct these businesses at a price, something that is not commonly noticed in the new suburbs, which are markedly separated by market spaces. Later, the significant thing that Naipaul and Singh both agree with is that the latter's pictures emanate something more than protest. So these photographers are not taking photographs of rallies and strikes and all of that. According to Naipaul, he says that they are subtler and more interesting than protest, in response to which Singh says, and I quote, "Protest one sees every day in the newspaper." Singh goes on to bring up the question of change and transformation in India through not just the freedom movement and democracy, where he says, and this change, this transformation, you see it in Bombay more than anywhere else in India. Ambedkar, for instance, I put in Ambedkar because of these forces of change, and I was coming to certain conclusions. After all, one has to come to conclusions about one's own country. Singh sees the country as a prism, which includes the ancient, medieval, and modern, and he writes that it was also a larger and mysterious element which is rarely seen, can be hidden by the tragic side of India. And this continues. And Bombay is one of the prime components of the prism. If I may say so, your book, A Million Mutinies Now, is talking to Naipaul, contains what was to happen, the killing and the burning in 1992-93. And in this image, you have two printers who look into Raghubeer's camera again, and on their rear is there a curtain that separates their work-eating area, which has the battle scene of Shivaji probably fighting in the Battle of Panipat, or the scene from the Mahabharata. The photographers whose work is studied in this chapter attempted to put a frame around the real in their documentary photography, and in doing so, their positionality and work unravels tensions and frictions in how the everyday lives of the working classes of Bombay are shown. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for the lovely conversation. I did want to ask a little bit more about the title of
Yeah.
your talk.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to name it Bombay, Mumbai?
Yeah, thank you for that. I didn't bring it up. As I was going through archival material, which are basically magazines in different languages, Bombay is referred to as Mumbai in Marathi magazines, Bombay in, Hindi magazines, and there's street parlance. So I wanted to kind of be mindful of all the ways of referring to the city. And that the official name change in 95-96 also carries this history of different ways of calling and naming a city that had a longer history prior. It's not as, it is contentious, but one also has to kind of take these factors into consideration. Thanks.
Wait for the mic, please. Since your subject are workers and the working class, I wanted to ask you a question which has a critique rather that has often been raised with reference to Sebastião Salgado's work, that he over aestheticized his subjects. And of course, we know that he did focus to a very great extent on work and working workers. What is your response to this? How were the people whom you studied, how do they deal with this question and problem of aestheticization?
This is something that, as I write the chapter, this is something that I will definitely have to speak with the photographers about this. A lot of them, they were photographing as they were going around the city, and it is a complex subject. It is a complex way of looking at these, at the protagonist. There is an element of aestheticization and voyeurism. But at the same time, a lot of these subjects weren't photographed maybe to an extent earlier, or they were more exoticized in earlier, say, colonial era photography. If you take photos of somebody, a ear cleaner or a palmist, these are questions that I'm still grappling with, because there's so many photographers with their own particular styles of photography. Some are more contemplative and direct. So the aestheticization is something that I'll be sitting with. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for that talk. I missed the first couple of minutes of your talk, and so I wonder whether you've already covered this. How did you come to select these particular photographers? And I was kind of interested in that. I know that, for example, Foynesson is a kind of a resident photographer, whereas Raghubeer Singh and others are not necessarily, resident photographers. And, you brought in film as part of it, but there was also painting, right? I mean, all of Sudhir Patwardhan's kind of work is kind of central to thinking about working class representations in Mumbai. And of course, Sudharak Olve, right, who is this other very, very large figure in photography in Mumbai. And so I was wondering how this particular selection kind of crafts a particular kind of representation, because it's also almost entirely island Mumbai, right? It isn't suburban Mumbai.
Absolutely,
It's
yeah.
almost entirely
Yeah.
actually,
Yeah.
Fountain and fort, maybe a little bit to Dharavi, but that's about it. Otherwise, it's pretty much that. So, I mean, there are different ways in which we can think about what is the kind of working class that is kind of conjured up through your choice of photographer and through your choice of location within the city itself. So I was just wondering if you had, ways of thinking through those kinds of questions.
Thank you. Yes, Foynesen, Sunit Taraporwala, Ketaki Sheth are Bombay photographers, very different. So is Sudharak Olve. I have yet to bring in Sudharak in my work. This is a work in progress. And that's the interesting thing, because whether they were resident or outsider photographers, at least the ones that we've looked at today, they do confine themselves to South Mumbai. And you do then see a particular kinds of workers. They've not gone to the suburbs. As you've rightly pointed, their radius is narrow. They've not looked at emerging Navi Mumbai. There's one photograph that Raghubeer Singh takes of an office, architect's office in Navi Mumbai. I think it's Charles Correa's office, and we have a talk going on alongside. The work of painters like Sudhir Patwardhan, G. Patel, I'm looking at in my introduction as a kind of, what are painters doing as a kind of introduction to how photographers then look at the city. I'm very mindful of the fact that the radius is confined to South Bombay, and what that does in terms of what kinds of industries and workers are captured. It leaves out a whole swath of the city.
Yeah, this is sort of a related question, which is, do you think these photographers that you've sort of highlighted here and the others that you study, do they start with a narrative in mind and then find images which support that narrative? Or are they, do you think maybe in their earlier years, simply taking photographs and then a narrative develops in their mind over time? Because you've got V.S. Naipaul here, who's of course a novelist, and he clearly has a narrative, in his mind.
Yeah.
But how do you think it works for the photographers? And a sort of corollary question, do you have a narrative in mind and then you select photographs from very prolific photographers? Or have you sort of, done a survey of hundreds or thousands of works and then develop the narrative for yourself in your dissertation or the research you're doing?
Thank you. So the photograph that I look at here and in the larger chapter on fine art by fine art photographers are largely taken from their photo books, which is a small selection of their work, of their corpus. So there is a narrative, but at the same time, they're taking photos of all kinds of other things that are happening in the city. Quintessential kind of scenes of Ganesh Chaturthi, Marine Drive, etc., etc. So I had to cull these photographs and create my own narrative, which I'm still kind of, pushing forward. Earlier, I thought of, a particular narrative of a day in the life of the working classes. But I decided against that. And Yeah, the narrative that I'm interested in is of alienation. How does photography capture that? And my selection of Bombay is basically to, because everybody says everything changed in 1992, 93, or with the name change in 95, 96. And I was interested to understand what was the build up to those events. So I'm interested in the everyday. These are just facets of the everyday. What is the build-up? What is the dissonance? What is the disenfranchisement that's going on the ground? So that's an aspect that I'm looking at.
Hi. This is a slightly general question about the notion of gaze. And you spoke in the beginning about the conversions of various gazes, including yours. And now we have become part of that enterprise because we have also looked at the photos. So the quintessential idea of the gaze or the photography has to do predominantly with the light and the space, right? I was wondering what happens to, because in the photographs you see the city in flux constantly. Even if people are sleeping, there's something happening in the background where the flux comes tumbling out at you. What about the night, when the light sometimes curtails that gaze, sometimes it broadens it and goes into the infinity? And then what happens to the aesthetics of the photography in a city? Essentially where the locus of the photographer or the frames have to essentially do with the motion of the worker. When the city comes to a slightly, standstill mode, or when it wears a slightly deserted look, what happens to the gaze there in a city? Are there photos of the nights, of the working class? Because everything seems to be moving.
That's a great question. Raghubi Singh uses flash photography, even if it's, the evening, as we sort of question. I mean, the night usually is twilight. Photographs of the sex workers of Kamathipura. These are some of the more darker images where light doesn't quite enter. It has nothing to do with the time of day as such. Let me try and bring up other photographs. These are taken, in the evening. Workers are pulled up at Chaupati to celebrate Ganesh Chaturthi. And then you see a man who's posing here like Amitabh Bachchan, which gives him a different way of being in the city. There's another photograph which I don't think is here. So, sorry. Namdev Dhasal with his translator Dilip Chitre and a restaurant owner, a kebab seller in Kamatipura meeting up in the night. Yeah, that would be interesting to think through in terms of, say, organizing activities in the evening, play, difference between work and play, but does that really exist because work is going on at night as well? But I think it has to do with whether they were really moving around at that time. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, thank you for the talk. I have two questions like related to the ones asked before. So, okay, given that you're focusing here on South Mumbai, the one thing that was maybe lacking was the presence of fishermen communities in the photographs. So, is that a choice that you make or the photographers make? Like there are even within South Mumbai, there are several like Sasundok and Badwar Bagh area. A lot of things go around, and there are interesting aspects to delve in there as well. Because except I saw that there was, as you mentioned, there was one boat at Chowpatty Beach So like whenever the fishermen come, like there are a lot of other
Yeah.
labor and activities
Yeah.
that go around throughout the day associated with fishing. And the second, like one gentleman here asked about the time when the photographs were taken, the day and the night. Similarly, what about the seasons as well? Like here we can see monsoons even, the different weather conditions, uh, uh, it disproportionately affect people from different classes, right? Movies like Parasite have kind of tried to look at it. So is there also something that these photographers or others have looked at, and how do you look at it? Thanks.
Thank you. I mean, there are some of these photographers have taken photographs of the Koli community, and they tend to be slightly romanticized. I'm still working my way through their inclusion. I feel that the images of the Koli uh, women are slightly romanticized, but there are one or two of the Koli men which are more sensitive, which I think I will bring in as I write this chapter. And the seasons, absolutely. I mean, there are tons of pictures of the monsoon in Bombay. A lot of them, again, romanticized, but also showing the difficulties of the city. City comes to a standstill, etc., etc. But showing the difficulties of wading through that water, workers wading through, going home after work, and those are typical quintessential sites of the city that you would see in a feature, like rainy Bombay, and these are an amalgamation, a set of photographs of the city. So seasons would be an interesting lens to look at the city through, the heat, uh, traveling through these difficult, uh, times of the year. Thanks.
Hello, hi. I just finished and pass. Yeah. Uh, yeah. Sir, I'll finish the question, then I'll pass the mic. 1 minute, sorry. So I'm from Bombay slash Mumbai slash Mumbai. And a lot of these stories are very interesting because I'm from Worli, Biditsar. Grew up with like a lot of these stories, but like didn't have a visual reference of to picture them. And this is very interesting because I've not seen a lot of these images, right? But I was curious, like, are there any photographers who captured like Worli and Parel area specifically, or like have you come across these photos from these specific areas? Because if there are any, and like if there are photo books, like I would like to know.
Yeah, that's a great question. The photo of the food cart under the flyover is in Worli, and but a lot of these photographs don't mention the location. I mean, looking at the site, we assume that they're in South Bombay. Some of these photographs are one taken in a textile mill, which we can assume to be in Worli Parel. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So even this fishing boat that is captured, there was never fishing happening in the Chopati beach. Yeah, there was no fishing at all. It's maybe just Kolaba Sassoon docks. That is where the Koli community and the Kolaba market, where you saw the fishing and the actual Koli community residing and living there.
Yeah. I mean, there's just one. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I've been to Vikhroli and Thane. And I'm not sure of what others will say.
She's not taken the photograph.
When you go to Bombay, what the village is only South Bombay. Yeah, and there the mills were there. Suburb Bombay doesn't have any mills, nothing. People moved out because of space. You are giving a distinct from the photographer's point of view.
Mitar Bedi, I'm, industrial photography. So I'm not really interested in industrial photography. Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah.
So, quick question. I just have a question as to how are you going to deal with like the possible bias in your study, since photography back then was like quite a privileged position, like a profession or a hobby, since cameras were not like that common. So only people like say upper class or upper middle class would have like access to this. So since that those people who are taking the photographs are not a part of the working class, how are you going to deal with the bias that comes up?
Yeah, this chapter looks at fine art photographers. When I bring in Sudarak's work, that will lend an necessary angle of working class. The working class and lower caste cameraman behind the camera. The photojournalist is when I look at the chapter. There's a chapter that I look at which solely looks at photojournalism and Marathi media magazines. Those photographers are not privileged, they don't come from privileged backgrounds. So that is when they are really stepping into the action of the street and taking, photographs of strikes, of traffic jams, of hartals, rallies, and so on. So that distinction of class, I will be definitely making in my work. So thank you. Because these are photographers, as I mentioned earlier, they were, exhibiting in galleries and museums, and they had, exclusive privileged access to publish their work as photo books. They were not daily photographers. They were not newspaper journalists. They were, documentary photographers or fine art photographers. They were capturing for, taking photographs as an aesthetic purpose, aesthetic and also documentary.
Street photography, right?
Yes. But all
So
photography
fine
that I
art
look at is street photography. So the photojournalism is also street photography. The advertising photography that I look at of the working classes are street photography of workers working waiting at a bus stop. It's street photography.
But you would consider these as fine art? Whatever you have shown?
They call themselves fine art photographers.
Hi. Fascinating stuff. I have a methodological question. Coming from an arts-based methods kind of practitioner kind of thing, I'm wondering whether, what we're hearing, what I'm hearing is a lot of your interpretation, right? It's pretty much discourse analysis, kind of beefed up by your understanding of the space and your reading, etc. I'm wondering whether it's a practice at all in your field to take these images to the working class. Obviously, you can't take it to 1990, but to throw those images out there and see what interpretations people come up with there as a way of displacing your own, as someone called them, biases. But I mean, obviously, it's something more complex. The second is a reflection. Your use of Gaman, I thought, was very interesting. I love that film. And for me, especially that song, and every time we're seeing images of the city and he's driving around, that's the time where we're getting breathing space. You look at the rest of the film, when he's inside those closed quarters, when you feel the oppression in every frame. So there's a role that the city plays in terms of allowing you to breathe. It's precisely the opposite of alienation. It's precisely, so I'm wondering what's happening over there in terms of your use and whether the city itself plays a certain role in the photography that you're looking at, that in that kind of assemblage.
Thanks. I had to bring in many, of my own analysis because it's not it was hard to find art historical analysis in other books, or so I had to bring in much of my own interpretation. But eventually, of course, there'll be a theoretical framework. I mean, that's the plan, that, to showcase these photographs, take them back to the working class in different ways. It could be an exhibition or just going to neighborhoods. That would be an essential practice of this project eventually. And as, Ghulam Hassan was driving around the city, that's his time to sort of like, take a break. But the lyrics of the song is also, articulates his despair and anguish. I don't know what this reflection means, where am I going? And he's thinking through things. So, but the look is definitely about alienation. But it's also this, taxi drivers doing their work, driving around, looking for work, trying to make ends meet, and kind of jostling with their personal lives, as with the rest of the film of Gaman does. But I'll definitely look into that. Thank you.
Hi, Aisha. I was very interested with your bit about Namdev Dasal that you brought up in the beginning, and I was trying to see how that those few lines that you'd highlighted, how that relates to these images wherein you see workers also posing, and and I read moments of self-fashioning there, etc. Self-fashioning in some ways. So and then you also kind of gave us a glimpse into other slides, and I saw that he still kind of figures in your work, and I'm just curious about what is the figure of Namdev Dasal doing through the entire project. If you want to share a little bit, that's it.
No, that's a great question, because one of the ways of framing this chapter is you have all these so-called nameless subjects being photographed, but you have a named subject, Namdev Dasal, who is not an unknown kind of taxi driver driving around the city. He's at a rally, he's organizing. I thought there's a lot going on. So maybe in another chapter, I'll sort of look at individuality, the question of, self-fashioning. I don't know if that's what you meant. Thank you. Yeah.
So a big part of living in Mumbai during the 50s and 60s or even the 90s was the chawl culture.
Yeah.
Like a significant number of people used to live there. And since Mumbai had like semi-decent public transportation, they used to travel every day. So I know like a lot of old people who have decades of friendship or like bonds with other people just because they used to travel in the same bus or train every day.
Yeah.
So are there any like photographers who capture that perspective or that narrative? Because people living in chawls, they also came from their villages or like from rural areas, and they're trying to fit in the society.
Yes.
They didn't know anyone and they're just trying to socialize and stuff. So do you know any other photographers or like who? I know traveling people in Mumbai trains is kind of a cliched thing for photography, but do you know? And the other question I wanted to ask you was that apart from photography, have you ever considered taking perspective from other media such as books? Because there is like a ton of Marathi literature written during 60s and 70s describing how the everyday life of a middle class Mumbaikar used to be. So yeah, those are my...
Thank you. Chawl photography, there isn't too much of it. I don't know if I'll get to it now. There are just photos of exteriors of chawls. Very little photographs taken inside a room. Then again, I'll have to go into different aspects of life, and which I'm very interested in. So I'll have to kind of think about how to organize my work, because you have these street photography and you also have these chawl life, community life, defined by the communities that they came from. There are photos, say, of Janmashtami. Those are quintessential photographs that you see of Chaul cultural life. I'm looking at the work by Baburao Bagul and other writers in Marathi. Maran swast hota hai, death is cheap. The name don't come to mind right now, but I'm definitely looking at Marathi writers. Thank you. Yeah, there are pictures of, lots of pictures.
Hi. Hi. Thank you for the talk. So, not from the era that you have covered here, but some of the questions reminded me of the recent film All We Imagine Is Light. And I was wondering if that interested you and what your thoughts were in it. Someone mentioned light, and that movie had a lot of night shots because that's when workers' life sort of is after their workday ends. And also, I think some scenes were from Monsoon when the working class is most affected. And also, it emphasized a lot on blue light, which I think is sometimes a symbol of poverty because the tarpaulin on the slums is blue. So I wonder if that was something which interested you and you studied.
Not. I mean, it interests me in that it's a city of migrants, and here you see women workers traveling. There's also this documentary called Ladies Special by Nidhi Tuli, where she goes into the ladies' compartment and talk to these women as they sing, cut vegetables, celebrate, and do all those things. There are many, many films that I love about the city, and some of them I mentioned. Shahid Akhtar Mirza's films are great. So yeah, I'll. The question about light and nightlife, I'll have to sort of think through with Tanveer's question about that. So thank you. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Meghna, and I'm a Mumbaiker as well. So like I came in looking for home, a piece of home here. Yeah, a lot of it. I mean, I'm not here to really pick apart like the main topic. I don't have a question, but rather I had an observation. You showed us a few slides of what like the Mumbai was turning into the cinematic center, and the movie center was shifting from Kolkata to Mumbai. And at that point of time, it also struck me that there was a lot of like change happening in terms of working class there, as there was political unrest and flux in terms of Mumbai itself. The movie industry itself was creating a lot more work opportunities for the working class, and the portrayal also changed into a sort of rebellion, heroism, like for working class. So like you showcased Amitabh Bachchan being the rebellion, the named person among the nameless ones. So it's like also interesting to look into how it changed the narrative about how we looked at people who were helpless, poor, versus like we are the mass, we are revolutionary. So it was just an observation. That's it. Yeah.
No, that's a great question. The film industry, there are great photographs by Raghubi Singh of workers on a film set, and it's a similar kind of alienation and despair that's captured. As they sit at the set and wait. It's not glitzy at all. So yeah, thanks.
So sorry, I forgot to ask this. So have you also considered something related to food in Mumbai? Food. From that perspective, because many of the fast food restaurants or chains originally started in Mumbai as a way to quickly serve food to like mill workers and people on their lunch breaks. Primarily, I think you showed a picture of people eating pav bhaji. So pav, like adding pav to everything in Mumbai started because mill workers had to like return to work and they couldn't have oil stains on their hands. So or like Irani restaurants where people usually took lunch breaks. So like have you like do people like have that sort of stuff, explore that sort of stuff as well?
I'll have to, kind of, the thing is, I have to work with the photographs that are there. Maybe when I look at my other chapters, there are more specific questions of outlooks about how do they carry food. There are very few photographs of taken inside these textile mills. Either they were not allowed to go in, and I believe that what it is when I spoke to many people in the city. Very, very few photographs, even in not exactly a chawl, but a room, a koli, where there are 10, 4 or 5 bunk beds put one on top of the other. The person who took the photograph said he had to take them surreptitiously. He didn't. The lighting is not great and all of that. So those are photographs taken in the night, and you just see these workers sitting on their charpais. I was looking for everything, and I have to kind of work with what I get. Hopefully sometime. Thank you. Yeah.
One thing that always like interests me is the, how do I say, the ethics of the photographer themselves, right? When you say that they position themselves as a voyeuristic intrusion into somebody's lives, have you do you have any thoughts on, for example, when you're going into the chawl, that one photograph that you showed, like clearly the man seemed very sleepy, and you're like, starting a flash on his face. Any thoughts on, of course, ethics becomes a very different question during that time, but still, is that a theme that you've explored of the photographers themselves following a certain set of rules, or I don't know, respecting privacy for all that?
Absolutely, yeah. There's no public-private distinction here, and they become subjects for somebody else's work of art, which is displayed to an international audience, and it plays into a certain narrative about the city, which is reality, but how do you show it? Of course, I'll be looking into the question of ethics, aesthetics. What is the, what's the fine line? Because the photographs of Bombay that I do not quite, or let's say colonial era photography of Bombay is, of these lovely boulevards and South Bombay, but here you have a different idea of South Bombay. It is South Bombay, but it is also, it's a different picture. So, and that they are appropriated as subjects for aestheticized. Are their working lives getting better? Is something being done? How are they shown? Is there any consent? These are questions that I'll be thinking through. Thank you.
Also, just an observation, I might be wrong, but for whatever reasons, the overall tone of the photographs kind of seems very melancholic and somber. And it's okay, we are talking about narratives and stuff like that, but also in the day-to-day lives, there is an element of joy also in people, right? I mean, many people have come to Mumbai for opportunities, and aren't those aspects also captured to kind of give a full picture of what people's lives are, or is it a bias that we are giving, by giving that somber look to the photographs?
Yeah, there's so many layers and gazes to this that how do we want to look at working class lives? Are we only going to look at celebration by way of Ganesh Chaturthi? Those are moments where you see that it is, very different from their despondent body language and things like that. Definitely, I mean, there are so many different ways of looking. So thank you for bringing in these different aspects.
Right, I'd like to thank Aisha Martin for bringing today's session to BIC. Thank you to the audience for spending your evening with us. If you'd like to know more about future BIC events, there's a QR code to our WhatsApp community that you can scan outside. Thank you and good night.
Thanks.